We have all heard the old adage, money can't buy you happiness. Seems, though, that the saying might not necessarily be true. Researchers based at Harvard and the University of British Columbia have been looking into the saying, and here is what they found. The survey was conducted in 4 fairly wealthy countries: the US, Canada, the Netherlands and Denmark. Research suggests that people want to avoid giving up time when they could be earning. They called this time stress. And they've linked it to lower well-being, including reduced happiness, increased anxiety and insomnia. The solution: use the thing you can get more of, money, to buy the things which are limited, time. By spending on things which save us time, for example, paying someone to do your cleaning, we can turn wealth into well-being. Or, put another way, money may not make you happy, but it can buy you time, and that does boost happiness. Well, with me in the studio is Mark Williamson, who is the Director of Action for Happiness, a think tank and movement of people committed to building a happier society. You have to be rich to be happy, then?
Well, there is a relationship between money and happiness, and certainly, it's very hard to be happy if you don't have the means to cover life's basics. So to some extent, this old adage of money can't buy you happiness is true. But when it comes to how we spend our money, we've known for some time that experiences matter more than material things. But what this research seems to show is that using our money to sort of avoid time-consuming and perhaps unpleasant experiences can be really a major boost. And in fact, we sometimes make quite strange decisions about our time. For example, moving further from our work and then ending up spending longer commuting, which makes us more miserable.
But what happens if you haven't got enough money to buy a cleaner? I mean, it does seem to be very much skewed to material things.
Well, I think that's a really important point, and we shouldn't suggest that somehow people who are on very low incomes can suddenly transform their day-to-day decisions to become vastly happier. But one of the interesting things about this study from Harvard is it seems to show that this effect is true across all income levels. So even people on relatively low incomes, if they make slightly different choices about how they use their money to free up time in particular, that can make a big difference. So to give a practical example, instead of saving money to buy more televisions, trainers, products, if we use that money instead to free up time with loved ones, time to be outdoors, time to pursue hobbies, it can make a big difference.
Stay with us. I want to go via webcam to speak to Emma Seppala, who works at Stanford University and is author of the Happiness Track. What do you think of these findings?
Well, they're very much in line with the research, which shows that we really derive much more happiness from experiences than from material goods, especially experiences with loved ones or experiences in which we can live out our values altruistically or in some other way. So it makes a lot of sense that way.
But as I said to Mark, I mean, you need to be wealthy.
Well, only to a certain extent. The research shows that once we've reached a threshold, it really doesn't make much difference, and that threshold is actually not very high. So it's a misconception.
Trading money for minutes then. I mean, I always thought that, especially when you speak to older people, they say actually what makes me happy and gives me a contented life is being mentally and physically fit and not having serious health problems. I mean, where does this fit into the structure of the elements of things which make you happy?
Well, elderly people actually show a lot more appreciation for what they have. They have a sense of a limited time. And so again, that plays into what we're talking about here, is that time is so valuable. It's really all we have. And are we going to make the best of it? And what this research shows is that when we do, we are happier. We do derive more fulfillment.
Mark, are we an increasingly time-stressed society?
I think that's true, actually. I think a lot of the sort of so-called progress around technology and infrastructure and changes in our working and leisure lives have actually brought this increasing sense that we haven't got enough time, that we're always on. And so maybe one of the messages behind this is actually being more conscious of how we choose our time, getting out of autopilot where they're sort of always busy, and shifting more to I'm deliberately choosing how I live my life and choosing to prioritise what matters, I think is really important. So this idea in particular of taking back control, we know autonomy is really important for happiness, and choosing to connect. So relationships are so vital, and yet instead of all this time we spend tied up in our work or staring at screens, we can be using that time to reconnect with loved ones. So the simple things are often don't have any financial expenditure, but they do require time. They do require us to choose to give them a priority in our lives.
And Emma, it seems that we are increasingly unhappy at work.
Correct. Well, one of the things that we're doing is we are valuing busyness. We kind of wear it as a badge of honor. And yet research shows that, all those stress levels, obviously, we have to pay a price for them. But if you look at the research, people prefer to give themselves electric shocks than to sit there and be idle. So we've also got to learn to deal again with the ability to have free time, to free up our time and to do what we wish in it. We can't get so hooked up on being busy that we feel stressed if we're not.
Mark, what would your advice be for the things to do to make you happy? Is it friends, relationships, or other elements as well?
So I think the fundamental needs for happiness are a sense of sort of control of your life. So I think this idea of money is important because to some extent money represents the ability to choose how you spend your time. But beyond that, many other things matter even more. So relationships in particular in terms of our outside world, in our families, our communities, our schools and our workplaces. But also this inner sense of mental health, this idea of how do we feel about ourselves? How do we sort of behave towards ourselves? We're often so busy because we're really kind of feeling I'm not good enough.
That's self-esteem.
It's sort of self-esteem, but it's almost more self-kindness. It's not about saying I'm the best. It's about saying I'm okay as I am. I don't need to be richer, more beautiful, faster, cleverer. I'm okay, and I can refocus on the people around me and the things I care about.
Emma, is there a problem that this research was done in really quite wealthy Western countries? I think Denmark has been voted the happiest country in the world, and Burundi the least happy. But is the research slightly skewed as a result of that?
Yes and no. So, we do know that some people have it all and are not happy, and some people don't have anything and are. So definitely cultural differences will come into play here, but in other ways they may not, in terms of it's not always a question of wealth. The other point I'd like to make to Mark's wonderful points is that we know from research on happiness that the greatest sense of happiness is derived from a sense of purpose, a sense of something beyond yourself, relationships, altruism, kindness. That is where true fulfillment is found, and yet we get lost in the material. And yet that is, what all the research points to. In addition to self-kindness, so compassion to others, compassion to yourself. That really is what the research points to as one of the greatest predictors of happiness, not just in the moment, not just that momentary satisfaction, but over the long run, over your life.
Okay, Emma Seppala and Mark Williamson, thank you both very much indeed. And by the way, you both look extremely happy. You've obviously, it's working. Smiley faces.